Winning 4 consecutive games, the Seahawks have climbed to the top of the NFC West, in large part due to some clever personnel moves made by both Mike Macdonald and John Schneider. We're going to be taking a look at how those moves have been catalysts for Seattle's resurgence in the second half of the season as they push for the playoffs here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be welcoming back my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. Sorry that all my travel plans made it that we couldn't have our normal Monday show, but we get to talk more about Sunday's win over the Arizona Cardinals and much more. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, whether you are in Bismarck, North Dakota, or you are listening in nearby Sammamish, Washington. We appreciate each and every one of you for listening into Locked On Seahawks 5 days a week. The Seahawks heading into Week 15 as the first place team in the NFC West, riding a 4-game winning streak. We're going to take one last look at that win in Arizona to pull off the season sweep against the Seahawks division rivals in the desert. And we're going to be taking a first look at the Green Bay Packers and see what's new with the surging Lambeau Cheeseheads. We'll get to that on today's episode, which is brought your way by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Winners of 4 straight. The Seahawks are as hot as anybody in the NFL right now. They've climbed to 8-5. They are clearly playing as good of football as they have all season long. The defense has been clicking for the last 4 or 5 games. The offense is starting to find some traction with the run game to go with Geno Smith. There's a lot to be excited about. But when you look at where the Seahawks are at right now, and I think it's fitting because I believe it was our Tuesday show exactly 5 weeks ago that we had our temperature check on Mike Macdonald, John Schneider, and Geno Smith. I think if we did that again today, I think you would see dramatically different temperatures. It would fit the winter. I think they'd all be sub-zero because all 3 of Seattle's brass have had a big part in getting this team back into first place in the NFC West. But in particular, Rob, I want to talk about how Mike Macdonald and John Schneider have pushed all the right buttons. And I'm emphasizing the word all. Every personnel move that they have made over the course of this season, changing up the roster, has at least been a slight upgrade over what they had previously. The guys that have moved into the starting lineup, whether it's Tyrese Knight as a rookie, Josh Jobe, now Satoa Lamea, all these moves have been key components of this surge for the Seahawks getting back into first place, and both Macdonald and Schneider deserve a ton of credit for that.
No, they really do. I think that John Schneider, just in the first place, in hiring Mike Macdonald when he did, I think that was a move that a lot of people expected. Of course, Mike Macdonald was had one of the great resumes in all of the NFL. But still, the fact that he was able to pull it off, we are now kind of seeing the fruits of that labor. And then, as you said, Corbin, just seeing the personnel moves that Mike Macdonald as head coach, what he is pushing for, to see Tyrese Knight go from being an unpolished rookie to now playing exceptional football. And obviously a huge part of that is the addition of Ernest Jones as the other inside linebacker, and the fact that they are playing as well as they are right now. I think that is where you have to start off the conversation. But you mentioned the player that I really wanted to kind of focus in on here for a moment, and that's being Satoa Lamea. And this the fact that Seattle is running the football with the tenacity, the physicality that they are showing now, to me, that is one of the most encouraging developments of this season so far, as well as, again, another player that you mentioned in Josh Jobe. I mean, just his incredible play at the cornerback position. We knew that Seattle had a couple of stars in Tariq Woolen and Devin Witherspoon, but who was going to play that other role, especially when Trey Brown started to struggle earlier in the year? That was one of the big question marks here, especially when you consider all the different different talents at the wide receiver and quarterback positions in this division. Josh Jobe has been an absolute revelation. Kobe Bryant, the safety spot with Rayshawn Jenkins returning back onto the field. There was some talk out there that maybe Kobe Bryant wasn't going to play. He's not only played, he's played very, very well. So again, to me, it almost feels like John Schneider certainly, I think, deserves some consideration for Executive of the Year for his role in this development. But right now, it feels like Mike Macdonald is basically like Geppetto. He's a puppeteer. He is just doing everything that is going to help the Seahawks get on this winning streak here and wind up being the NFC West Division champion when it's all said and done.
When you look at this defense and how poorly they played the first 2 months, Ernest Jones come in the first game that he was with the team, put an asterisk next to it. The guy was here for 15 minutes and then put a uniform on.
Yeah.
Ever since then, this defense has just been playing lights out. And then when you plug Tyrese Knight in there the last 4 games, with those 2 players in the lineup, Rob, they are giving up 13.7 points per game on defense. Number 1 in the NFL. And I know there's some fans out there that have said, but look who we've played. Yeah, look who you've played. Kyler Murray was playing as well as any quarterback in football up to these 2 games that Seattle won and made him look terrible in the process. But he had 13 touchdowns, 6 going into that first matchup in week 12. The Cardinals had won 4 straight. Brock Purdy was kind of that kryptonite for Seattle for the last couple of years. They have not been able to figure him out. They really held him in check in the last game. And Aaron Rodgers, I don't care about the Jets' record. I mean, you still got Devontae Adams and you still got Garrett Wilson. And Aaron Rodgers isn't what he used to be, but he's still Aaron Rodgers. It's not like they have been playing a bunch of backup quarterbacks here and they are getting the job done. But it feels like those linebackers, those are obviously the biggest moves. John Schneider deserves the credit for bringing in Ernest Jones. And I think Mike Macdonald's willingness to say, look, Tyrell Dodson, it's not necessarily that it's all on you, but we feel like we can go a different direction. It's going to be better for our defense. And Tyrese Knight is ready for this opportunity and pushing that correct button. Those 2 guys are just feeding off each other, and both are playing outstanding football. Josh Jobe is in the top 20 in receiving percentage allowed. He is in the top 20 in passer rating allowed among qualified corners. We're talking almost 100 corners. He is in the top 20. And he is near the top of the list in yards after catch. So when guys are getting catches on him, he is getting them to the ground. And so Josh Jobe continues to play well. And what can you say about Satoa Lamea? Look, if you read my weekly report cards on Sports Illustrated, I always have my top 5 grades. Satoa Lamea finished in the top 5 this week, and he absolutely deserved it. Rob, you and I were talking about this leading up to the show. I was sitting in an airport for hours yesterday. You know what I was doing during all that time? I was just watching reruns of Satoa Lamea pancaking people because he was doing it left and right in this game against the Cardinals. That has been what they're missing. And I feel like there's a contagious effect here. It seems like the rest of the offensive line, even Charles Cross was getting pancakes in the game yesterday. You get one guy in there that's kind of got that bully to him a little bit, and it's rubbing off on everybody. But all these personnel moves, and you could put Roy Robertson Harris in here if you wanted to. He might not be getting the big stats, but his presence is allowing you to move Leo Williams all over the place, which you couldn't have done without his presence. And he has been a big upgrade in that position. It's kind of that role defender. It just seems like, as you said, the puppeteer analogy is perfect. Mike Macdonald just sitting there. He is in his bag as the puppeteer right now, and he has figured out how to mix and match guys. And now you get LeMay on offense. Certainly been exciting to see both the coach and GM make these moves. And look, this is not sucking up to the organizational front runners because, like I said, we were taking a temperature check on these guys 5 weeks ago. But all of these moves have paid off with positive effects, and it's a big reason why this team has turned the season around, and they got a chance now to win the NFC West.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you just mentioned Roy Robertson Harris. I mean, to me, it's this very similar thing as what we saw with Laumea at the right guard position. And as you said, it just felt like, you know, an added degree of physicality and nastiness. It really has rubbed off on some of his teammates. I think that Roy Robertson Harris did the exact same thing. You know, remember we had our buddy Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jaguars that joined us after the Seahawks made that trade for Roy Robinson Harris. And he kind of talked about the fact that you're getting a tough guy, you're getting a nasty guy. And we both commented that's exactly what Seattle needs. And so to me, that is not coincidence that we've seen Seattle's intensity on defense really escalate since Roy Robinson Harris has been added to the squad. So again, there are so many different players that we can highlight here because it really feels like on any given game, you are going to see a different player create a big play for the Seahawks, whether it be on offense or defense. And as you said, Corbin, unfortunately, we weren't able to connect in yesterday's show. I got one statistic that I really thought I just kind of illustrated how much that Seattle's defense has improved. Kyler Murray had one game entering last week in which he threw multiple interceptions. Mike Macdonald's defense picked Kyler Murray off twice in the first quarter of last week's game. So again, it just feels like Seattle is seizing the NFC West right now. And a big part of it is because of the genius that it has been John Schneider and Mike Macdonald so far this season.
When we come back, we're going to have our Tell the Truth Tuesday takeaways, our final thoughts coming out of Sunday's sweep over the Arizona Cardinals and what it means moving into the final 4 games of the season. Don't go away. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Ice Shaker. If you're like me, your holiday shopping list is, well, let's just say it's far from complete. If that's the case, I've got the perfect gift for the passionate sports fan in your life. Perhaps you've heard of Ice Shaker. Ice Shaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and MLB, and it will make the ideal gift. It was created and used by the Gronkowski brothers. Ice Shakers has now sold over 1 million bottles. They've changed the game with workout bottles, and this is the gift you've been looking for. Go to iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% on your order. We're talking kitchen-grade stainless steel bottles that won't absorb odor like plastic bottles do. They're third-party tested, and I've tested this out. They will hold ice for at least 30 hours. I actually am going on 45 hours with my Ice Shaker, and the really cool part, it's fully customizable. You can get whatever team that you want. Order your team-branded bottles today at iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. Ice Shakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market, Ice Shakers. This episode is also brought your way by Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. With over 5 million active members, Prize Picks is the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, it's just you against the numbers. They offer the only injury insurance policy for real money daily fantasy platforms on the market. Even if one of your players gets injured, if that player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. Think Justin Jefferson's going to get more than 83.5 yards next week? Or Joe Burrow is going to pass for more than 1.5 touchdowns? Cook up your hot takes with friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And for your second listen, don't forget to check out Locked On NFL. It's now twice a day in the morning. Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans dishing out that morning cup of NFL espresso. And then later in the afternoon, our good friend Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars bringing the humor and NFL insight that you're not going to find anywhere else. Locked On NFL now twice a day. Make sure that you subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make it your second listen. The Seattle Seahawks improving to 8-5 with a 30-18 victory over the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday. For a second straight year, they pull off the season sweep against the Arizona Cardinals. And Rob, we talked about it last segment. Arizona was as hot as any team in the NFL before Seattle faced them in Week 12. And thanks to the Seahawks, they've really put the extinguisher on the Cardinals. They've lost 3 straight games, and though they're not eliminated, this certainly was a huge blow to Arizona's playoff chances, and it had the opposite effect for the Seahawks, who are now they're feeling really good. They've got that tiebreaker now on the Arizona Cardinals. They're 3 games above the 500 mark. And just looking at this game on Sunday, I know that you have been super excited for the opportunity to dive into the intensity and the physicality that we saw from the Seahawks team. Because look, I don't want to be over exaggerating, but this kind of felt like at the end of the 2012 season when we started to see the Seahawks really start to impose their will on opponents and start to play bully ball a little bit. We saw that on Sunday against a defense that they couldn't do that to just 2 weeks earlier.
Yeah, that to me is one of the most exciting aspects of this game, Corbin, is the fact that the Arizona Cardinals, basically, they appeared on paper to be the more desperate team. I thought that they would be able to match, perhaps even exceed Seattle's intensity, physicality, obviously playing in front of the home crowd. And obviously the Cardinals were able to go march right down the field to score a touchdown. I'll kind of talk about that in a couple of moments here as well. But I was just very impressed by Seattle's resiliency and just the sheer toughness that we saw from Seattle, whether it be along the offensive line, as we already kind of talked about before. What about Zach Charbonnet? I mean, looking at every single one of his runs, every single time he fell forward. And for a team that has struggled in short yardage as much as the Seahawks have, that to me is just an indication right off the bat of just the fact that your running back now has that mentality that you are always going to be moving forward. On the defensive side of the ball, there were some big collisions. The rookie Tyree Snider definitely made several of those. The fact that you had 2 sacks that the Seahawks got, one by big Jonathan Hankins, not exactly a sack master, another by the safety, Rayshawn Jenkins. It's just kind of showing the versatility of Seattle's defense. The fact that you didn't allow a single sack against the Arizona Cardinals team that, again, their head coach, is known for his creativity as far as creating some pass rush opportunities for an Arizona Cardinals team that frankly doesn't have a lot of talent, but has been getting by with guile and technique. And the Seahawks basically eliminated all of that. As I mentioned before, the 2 interceptions in the first quarter that basically stole this game from the outset, I really thought this was a game that Seattle won, again, because of their intensity, because of their physicality. And I thought that throughout the entire game, you could feel the Seahawks' size, strength, and power in this football game.
And you could feel Zach Charbonnet. I'm going to piggyback off what you're saying here. Look, I talked about this yesterday a little bit on the show. To me, most of this year, when the idea has been brought up that this offense is better catered to Zach Charbonnet's skill set, I've kind of pushed back against that. And I'm not going to completely jump off the deep end with this because I still think Ken Walker III is a phenomenal running back. But this team is starting to find its identity now. It has taken 3/4 of the season to do it, but they are starting to find their identity. And to me, their identity, Geno Smith and Mike Macdonald are saying, we got to be able to do everything. They're not going to completely abandon zone runs. I get that. But they have built an offensive line that has the physicality and athleticism to thrive with the gap system. So to me, the gap running that we have seen them find success with the last 2 games, I think this is sustainable because of the personnel they have. LaMea is an absolute dog. He gets guys to the ground. That pancake he had in the 51-yard touchdown run by Charbonnet. He did that, I believe it was Tonga that he threw to the ground on that play, a 330-pound defensive tackle, and he couldn't get up because he was just keeping him on the ground. And that's kind of that nastiness they've been missing there. Abraham Lucas had a couple of those counter trays. This is an athletic 6'5", 318-pound guy, and he looks like he's rookie self. He looks healthy. He is moving well. He gets turning upfield on those counter trays. Do you want Big 72 coming after you? No, you don't. Charles Cross had a pancake on that touchdown run by Charbonnet, the long one. He actually got to 3 different defenders on that play. This is an athletic offensive line that is built to do a lot of pulling, mix in your pin and pulls, mix in your counters, power. They had a 22-yard run on a power play where LaMea was out in front of Zach Charbonnet and got his hands on Jalen Thompson. This is an athletic offensive line. And I mentioned this, I thought it was just the Cardinals games, but look, they are a downhill, like we are hitting the gaps hard. You can beat teams like that when you mix in the counter, the power game. Seattle did that perfectly, but this feels like this is the identity of this team. To me, it absolutely is sustainable for the last 4 games, and maybe it's more sustainable with Zach Charbonnet getting more carries.
Quite possibly. And it's a good problem for the Seahawks to have when you have, 1A, 1B. You've got the flash and dash that is Kenneth Walker III, of course, but you also have the smash that is Zach Charbonnet. And so I'm going to kind of piggyback off of that idea of how Seattle is getting, better because of their personnel. To me, one of the real interesting additions that the Seahawks are going to have now is, of course, Uchenna Nwosu returning back to the field. He played in 21 total snaps in this last game against the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, his, having been injured for basically last month. And I was encouraged by what I saw from him. Now, if you just look at the box score, he had one tackle, he had one quarterback hit. But again, the Arizona Cardinals could absolutely field number 10 in this football game. And so just like how I feel like the Seahawks, when Kenneth Walker is back healthy, then Zach Charbonnet is most likely going to return as the secondary running back for this squad. Uchenna Nwosu getting back onto the field. I don't think that Boye Mafe or that Derek Hall necessarily have to worry about who might be starting. I do think Uchenna Nwosu is just going to add to an already formidable pass rush with that much more nastiness. And just kind of looking at Uchenna Nwosu, he lined up most of the time as the left outside linebacker going up against the right tackle, but he playing on the right side. He put his hand down in the dirt as well. The very first snap that he was on the field, Corbin, he basically blew up a double team, forced James Conner to run back inside. It was like number 10 is back for the Seahawks. And again, that physicality, that nastiness, I think that basically is catching. And the rest of the Seahawks on defense and offense, hell, even on special teams, with the way that Michael Dixon showed his grit in playing in this football game, it really did carry over. And I thought was absolutely critical to Seattle's victory.
And I think we got to mention Tyrese Knight when we're talking about a player that has that ripple effect. I mean, we've talked Devin Witherspoon. Tyrese Knight is kind of one of those soft-spoken. He's a different personality than Devin Witherspoon. Devin Witherspoon, you can hear chatting from the press box in the middle of the game. He's so loud. And he loves to talk. He loves to talk smack, but you know what? He backs it up. Tyrese Knight is really reserved, but he is not reserved with how he hits people. And I mentioned this today earlier in an article. He is a brick on skates when he hits people. This guy just absolutely, if he gets his hands on you, and we saw it in college, it is translated to the NFL. If you are in the vicinity and Tyrese Knight is in an area to hit you, you are going down. He just very rarely misses tackles, and he's going to deliver big hits. There were a couple of them in that game on Sunday where James Conner, of all people, who's one of the best in the NFL at breaking tackles, James Conner didn't get an inch after contact. As soon as 48 hit him, boom, he's dropping. It's like he's a crash test dummy hitting a brick wall. That's Tyrese Knight. And oh, by the way, he had 2 pass breakups in this game. And going back and watching the All-22, the one he made against Marvin Harrison Jr., you can count on one hand the number of linebackers that could make that play in the NFL. Marvin Harrison Jr. is an absolute stud, running from the slot, and he undercut that drag route and extended his arm and broke it up. He looked like a safety doing it. If you've got Tyrese Knight making plays like that in coverage, he had a pass breakup on a screen on a blitz. He was smart enough to stop himself in his tracks and then reached up and knocked it down, prevented the screen from doing anything, and he led the team with 12 tackles. He was nominated to the Pepsi Zero Rookie of the Week. I think he should win it with the game he had. Again, my top 5 grades, he finished number 2 on my list behind only Zach Charbonnet. This kid is playing outstanding football in all 3 phases, and he's playing with a lot of confidence. And, oh, by the way, after Ernest Jones had his interception, guess who had a pancake right in front of him? Number 48. Tyrese Knight he's one of those dudes. Every single play, he's going to give you something. He plays with physicality.
Yeah, he's a really good football player. He's playing very well, and it's exciting to see how his game is maturing. And again, that would be like, I guess, my final takeaway from this game, Corbin, is just that how exciting it is that the Seahawks feel like this is a team defense that is starting to excel. It's not a defense that has a couple of individual stars. And I was kind of chuckling when I heard a recent interview. It's actually on 710, and got to give Mike Salk and Brock Hewitt a little bit of credit here. They were asking Mike Macdonald about a coach, Adam Durde, and what he is doing. As defensive coordinator, of course, we know typically they're the ones calling the play. Mike Macdonald's the one calling the play. So what exactly is Adam Durde doing? And, Mike Macdonald kind of had a fun response to that. He basically said, well, what hasn't he done? And then he kind of stopped himself there for a moment and said, but you can't build him up too much because we want to keep him in Seattle. And to me, that type of mentality also applies to the players. If you have one player that has 10 or 12 sacks, for example, it's going to be really difficult to keep them here. If you have an injury to that player, then it could be absolutely catastrophic to their season. The Seahawks have 11 players that have at least a half a sack. Leonard Williams, of course, leads the team with 7. Derek Hall has 6. Boye Mafe has 5. Draymond Jones has 4. I mentioned the Seahawks have 11 players with at least half a sack. One guy who doesn't yet have a sack, we talked about earlier. Hell, we talked about 2 of them, Uchenna Nwosu and Ray Robertson Harris. Neither of them have a sack yet, but I think that they will. And again, because the Seahawks are so versatile, it looks like Baltimore West, exactly the type of defense that Mike Macdonald created with the Baltimore Ravens. And again, that to me makes them one of the most dangerous and certainly hot defenses in all of the NFL.
When we come back, we are going to shift our gears here. Look, we'd love to talk about this win and sweeping the Cardinals for the next month. It'd be a lot of fun, but there's bigger things at stake. The Seahawks are in first place in the NFC West, but only by 1 game. They got to again really formidable opponent in the Green Bay Packers coming to town. We're going to pull back the curtain and take a first look at what's new with Matt LaFleur's bunch in Green Bay. That's coming up next year on our Tuesday episode of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. We've got 4 games left to play. Get ready to tackle the latest NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can bet on everything from Tyler Lockett scoring a touchdown on Sunday night against the Packers to DK Metcalf being the first player in the game with a 30-plus yard reception. Just visit FanDuel.com and you can join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. You make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks, as always, to all the 12s tuning in. And thank you so much for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The red-hot Seattle Seahawks, 8-5, returning home. They did win their last home game against the Arizona Cardinals, so they broke that streak. That drought was certainly not one that fans were too proud of. But the Seahawks got back to their winning ways in that first matchup against Arizona. Now they get to host on Sunday Night Football the Green Bay Packers, who come in with 9 wins, and they're in third place in the NFC North. That's how good this division has been this year. But don't let that fool you that they're in third place. I think the Green Bay Packers, Rob, this is a dark horse to get to the Super Bowl in the NFC. They nearly dethroned the Lions in Detroit on Thursday Night Football last week. Jordan Love is back healthy after dealing with some injuries early in the season. They've got one of the best running backs in football in Josh Jacobs. They've got a physical offensive line. The defense is opportunistic. They've got a bevy of pass rushers that can get after you. This is a fun football team, and this is going to be a real litmus test for the Seahawks at home in a rivalry that we haven't really seen a big game between these teams in a while, but we know there's plenty of animosity between the Seahawks and Packers, and that's going to make this really fun in prime time.
Yeah, no question about it. I would love to see Golden Tate to be the guy that actually raises the flag to start off this football
I am
game.
praying that's what happens.
I think that would be an awful lot of fun. Hey, as we said earlier, Corbin, look, I mean, this is going to sound like a Seahawks podcast that is just, yay Seahawks and their blue colored glasses and all that kind of stuff. So as I said before, I really think that John Schneider deserves some executive of the year conversation. I think that one of the executives that also deserve to be in the running there would be Green Bay's general manager, Brian Gutekunst. And he did a spectacular job. He's considered the fact that Green Bay's 2 splashiest free agent additions is Josh Jacobs, who is currently 11th in the NFL in rushing yards. He's third in the NFL in rushing touchdowns. And then on the defensive side of the ball, the Green Bay Packers needed some help with the safety position. They signed Xavier McKinney from the New York Giants. McKinney just leads the NFL now with 7 interceptions. I said before about the Seahawks that they have 11 players that have at least a half a sack. The Green Bay Packers have 16 players that have at least half of a sack. So again, this is a quality football team. I just see some of the changes that we have made, some of the changes we've seen from the Green Bay Packers is obviously forever there. It was Aaron Rodgers, it was Devontae Adams, it was Aaron Jones. As I just mentioned, it's Josh Jacobs. As you said, it's Julian Love. The Green Bay Packers now, their leading touchdown catcher is actually a tight end, Tucker Kraft, that was selected a couple of years ago out of South Dakota State. So go Jackrabbits. He is, and he's a terrific player. And of course, we know how Seattle struggles against the tight ends all for years now. So again, this is a Green Bay Packers team that does have some differences from what we've seen in the past. But this is a terrific football team, a very well-rounded team that is basically mimicking exactly what we talked about before with Seattle. It's lacking the superstars. They aren't necessarily the guys that everybody and around the NFL fan base would know. But this is a really good football team. As you said, it's 9-3 or 9-4, excuse me, third in the NFC North, but still very much a Super Bowl contender. If the Seahawks are going to be able to beat this team, whether it be now or possibly in the playoffs, they are very much going to have to play that same physicality, intensity that we saw these last couple of games against divisional opponents.
Yeah, this, as I mentioned, it's a litmus test. But to me, the biggest reason it's a litmus test is the physicality, because Green Bay, to me, is in that upper echelon when it comes to teams that just bring it week in, week out. They've got their hard hat. Whether it's a guy like Rashawn Gary on defense, who's come back from a significant injury, he's having a great season, move him all over the place. They've upgraded at the linebacker position. They have upgraded with McKinney at safety. I mean, could the Giants possibly give up on more talented players that end up becoming superstars elsewhere? I mean, it's just insane to me. But I digress. The Seahawks are thankful for it because they've got a number of former Giants in their team that have been really good additions. Leonard Williams and Julian Love, obviously the most notable ones. But the Green Bay Packers are not an organization that in the past did much in free agency. They have changed in the last 7-8 years. They spend money in free agency now, but they are really good at it. They don't go overbound spending, but they bring in quality players, and that's what they were able to do. Josh Jacobs, I mean, how many teams are signing veteran free agent running backs? I think this is going to start changing, though, with the way Saquon's played in Philadelphia, Josh Jacobs in Green Bay. I think you're going to start seeing a shift there. People are realizing, oh, wait, running backs lasted 8 to 10 years in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Why did we suddenly think that they couldn't last? You're seeing these guys be really productive. But Green Bay hit home runs with both of those additions. And when you look at the draft class, they've had a few guys that have been banged up. Jordan Morgan, their first-round pick, the tackle out of Arizona, he is probably done for the season. He's a guy, though, that I liked a lot in the pre-draft process. Edgerrin Cooper, their second-round linebacker, he's been a nice addition to this defense. Javon Bullard and Evan Williams, their third and fourth rounders, have been starters on this defense. They both got hurt last week in the game against Detroit. We don't know if either one of those guys is going to be available for this game, but if those two are out, Jair Alexander, their standout corner, has been out the last 3 games. Who knows if he's back this week? This could be a secondary away from Xavier McKinney that's feeling pretty ripe in this game for some big plays just because of the attrition they've had there. But when those guys have been healthy, man, the Packers are just consistently one of the best drafting teams in the NFL. And they had like 80 draft picks this last year. And it felt like just looking down the list, it's like ball player, ball player, ball player, ball player. They just know how to evaluate talent across the board.
They really do. And again, when you have as versatile pass rush as the Green Bay Packers have, it's a lot easier to play in the secondary, but there's no doubt about it. The Packers have done a phenomenal job of drafting at virtually every position. Javon Bullard is one of the more reliable open field tackling safeties this last year's class. Evan Williams, the safety from Oregon, is one of the savvier, just very intelligent. Reminds me a little bit of Quandre Diggs and his ability to line defenders up around him. And obviously Xavier McKinney, as we talked about with the 7 sacks, the veteran, of course, but still the fact that he is making the big plays that he has so far this season, that just kind of illustrates how much of a big play specialist the Green Bay Packers are. So again, a very formidable opponent here in the Packers. Everybody's going to focus on offense, as well they should, but it's the defense actually that makes this that much more difficult of a matchup. And as you said, Corbin, if that defense is lacking some of their skill, some of their secondary players, then this could be a matchup where Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, JSN might be pretty excited about this one as well.
And that's going to be a perfect lead into tomorrow's episode. Matchup Wednesday, Seahawks, Packers, Sunday Night Football, Lumen Field. There's been some iconic games between these teams. Will we see another one? We're going to dive into the 6 key matchups to watch. That'll be coming up on tomorrow's episode. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. And make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Tune in tomorrow. We'll be diving into all those key matchups as we draw closer to Seahawks Packers Sunday Night Football. Thanks for listening in and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Go Hawks.